Hello and welcome to Empires of Aether, a turn-based strategy board game that has you wield the powers of an element of your choosing, vying for control of a new land, a land that controls the secret to a new element, Aether, the one that binds all of the others together, and only one has the right to trash talk at the end of the day. If you are brand new to this, you're in the right place because this video is going to serve as a how-to introduction to all of the aspects and general play of the game, as well as how to access the actual game itself, which is now available for public download so long as you have Tabletop Simulator. It is a mod available on there. So first, let's get you into the community, the Discord server, and I'll show you where to go from there. Once you have joined the Discord server, you'll see several text channels to choose from over here, and if you are brand spanking new, then what you're going to want to access is the virtual download how-to, which is at the bottom of the text channel options here. And at the very top of the screen, you'll see the Steam Community Shared File link, which is going to take you to a page, and all you have to do is tap the subscribe button. That will automatically put it into your file so that the next time that you boot up Tabletop Simulator and you go to load a file, Empires of Aether will be one of your top choices there, and I hope it quickly becomes one of your favorites. In addition to that, you'll also need access to a couple of these other files, and we will show you how to utilize those as you're getting into the game. This is a board game that is vying to have a competitive scene and experience something that I really haven't seen before. I know there are games that have tried to do tournaments or have competitive elements to it, such as Catan, but most of them are just, super RNG. It's a dice roll that determines everything, but this is a game where no two rounds are alike. The board is different every single time, your opponents and their strategies are different every single time, and you have multiple pathways to victory. So no two games feel even remotely similar to one another, and that's why I think this game has a real shot at being one of the first really, truly competitive games available on a tabletop setting. That is, of course, going for a totally virtual presence so that you can play with friends all across the globe. This is what the file looks like when you first boot it up, and you'll see there's a lot to take in at the moment, but it really is not so bad once we get into it. There's just so many choices to go with in the beginning, but once you have made your selection, the game plays itself out for you. We've got lots of community resources here available for you. The most up-to-date page of rules is also in that Discord page that we just showed you a moment ago, but you've got the other community files available for you right here. In addition, all the general information that you're going to need is present in the notebook page that you'll find at the top of your screen whenever you have Tabletop Simulator open. So this is our board. Our game board is randomly generated every single time, and in the current state of the game, I will be uploading different files to that Steam community page, which will give access to you at least 3 boards each game, so that if you are done with one board and you're done playing it out, then you are more than welcome to toss it to the side or delete it and grab the other one that's available to you on the side of the table. But on top of that, you can also build one yourself. All of the tiles have standard sizing so that you can easily place your own selections over the top. So what are we working with here? We have 13 elements to choose from. We have the original 4 elements that the game began with: water, air, earth, fire. Then we roped in a couple of intermediate elements. We've got ice, metal, magma, lightning. Then a few other niche picks: nature, poison, sand. And then more supernatural picks: arcane and blood. Every element has their own unique way of playing, own unique way of winning, and has a totally different feel for the game. Elements have different matchups with one another, advantages, disadvantages, and so you really have to weigh all of your options as you go into the game. And so what you do first and foremost is everyone is going to roll a dice, and you can find all of the pieces for all of the players in these bags up here, and feel free to take whatever color you would like, or to put a new color on it. If you're going to right click on these pieces, slap a new color on it, whatever you're feeling for the day, or if you want to make it more themed to your element, you are more than welcome to do that. And how it works is everyone is going to roll a dice, and the high roll is going to get to select their element first. The low roll is going to be selecting their element last. But that being said, because certain elements have certain advantages with certain environments on the board, as you can see, we've got fields, mountains, rainforests, lakes, deserts, swamps, and then just standard forests here. Those are your standard environmental tiles, and many of the elements have advantages with some of those environments. And so if the board is randomly generated every single time, it stands to reason that one element may have a significant advantage over others if allowed to be in that corner. Which is why the second step of the game, after everyone has rolled their dice, is everyone gets to ban an element. And this might not be something that you do in your first playthrough with your friends because you just want to get a feel for the game, but very quickly you'll start to pick up on some trends and patterns of the game, and you might want to implement this ban phase. For example, Earth and fire both thrive on mountains, and if you happen to have a map that has a lot of mountains on it, or in particular a lot of mountains in one corner or one side of the board, then maybe you don't want to square off against earth or fire because they are just going to have a huge advantage in the game. And so you get rid of those. Everyone gets a ban. And once those bans take place, the player who rolled the highest gets to select their element and their corner first. So we're just going to throw some elements out here. We're going to throw earth up here, water down here. Boom, boom, boom. Let's go with the original 4 like so. So now everyone has selected their corners, and the next stage of the game is where you get to put the most customization into your game available by selecting your own abilities. But what are we actually playing for? What do we need to consider? And how do we win this game? Well, inside these baggies, you will find a card that is going to be very helpful for that. Right here, this black card called Win Conditions. Now, these are the generic win conditions that any element can access. However, every element also has access to a unique win condition should they choose to pursue it later in the game. And to win the game, all you have to do is accomplish any 2 win conditions available in the game. So, if you eliminate a nation, which that means taking their capital tile that we just placed in those corners there, you can have 50 and 50 of each resource that we'll talk about here in a moment. Own 18 tiles, meaning you own a lion's share of the board. Defeating 2 boss tiles. Yes, this is a game where you can actually square off against NPC creatures, and you'll see that these monsters have their own domains and habitats on the board there, so if you defeat any 2 of them. Own 3 star tiles. Those are going to be those tiles with these these little golden beads on them, right? Little more contentious in the middle of the board, forcing you to go into areas that perhaps your enemy is going for as well. Or to own 10 armies. So there's a lot to take in here, and then you can see that there's a lot of different directions that we can already take with it. But on top of that, every element has their own unique way of playing and access to their own unique win condition. So lots of things for you to consider in the early stages, and that is where the next unique feeling comes into play. So let's go into the elements and what they have access to right now. Let's go ahead and take a look at the Fire Nation, which was the very first element ever actually created by myself. And so you have this stack of abilities next to it, and every element has this larger card available to them, and these are your nation passives. You always have access to these. But these little cards are your abilities. Every element starts out at Tier 1 and has access to a few abilities. But as you go into the game, you have the option to progress to Tier 2 and Tier 3, gaining you access to more and stronger abilities that are themed around your element. And so you'll notice this one on the top because this is the one I want to point out in particular. This is a Tier 3 ability, but it is a quest. This is the unique win condition that only Fire has access to. And this is something that you can choose to take. And what do I mean by you can choose to take it? Well, you can only have 3 of each tier ability taken with you in the game. And so, if you feel like you're going to need other abilities, then maybe your quest isn't going to be something that you opt for in a game, because your quest actually takes up one of the slots of your Tier 3 abilities. And so, already lots of decisions to consider. And so, we're just sorting these out here, right? And we don't need to lay them all out. But either way, you see you have lots of choices. There's even 6 more still left in the stack. I only get to take 3 from each tier. Tier 1 are the cards with no labels at the top. Tier 2, obviously labeled Tier 2. And Tier 3, labeled Tier 3. Notice, once again, that this quest is a Tier 3 ability. And because I can only have 3 of these cards in this Tier 3 slot, this will take one of the slots for me. So that is a heavy investment. But it could decide who wins the game. So, that is what you do in the next step of your game, and you'll notice that there are abilities that are strictly built to counter other elements, and you'll learn about those matchups through experiencing the game. but sometimes you take abilities strictly to counter your opponents. And that is a very, very important thing to realize. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go into a standard turn here, and we're going to go into how to actually set up your resources and do the general steps of the game. So now you've selected your elements, you've selected your abilities. Next is to set up the resources of this game. The economy is based on two resources: food, which is primarily used for your purchasing of soldiers, new reinforcements, that sort of thing, and building materials, abbreviated BM. I know. Abbreviated BM for building materials, which is primarily used for you putting construction on the board that can either enhance your economy or to improve your defenses in maintaining the land that you have acquired. And so we don't want to do that much work for that. I don't want to have to look at how many tiles that I've owned. I don't want to have to be constantly crunching numbers. And the wonderful news is you absolutely do not have to. So what do we have for you on that front? On that Discord, in that same room that we were just pointing to at the beginning of this video, you will see one of the official rules, the most up-to-date rules right here. You'll also see this Google Drive link. And when you click on that, that is going to give you access to the Google Drive link. Boom. That looks like this. And you'll see all of the elements listed here. And every player for their own element should click on their file. And since we are looking at fire today, we're going to take a look here. You have 3 different sections. You have one for food, one for building materials, and one for battle. And it looks like there's a lot going on here, but really all you're going to have to do is put in how much of each that you have, and the sheet is going to do the rest for you. So we're simply going to copy in, and we're going to paste this into our folder down below. And so you'll see that it is organized food, BM, and battle down below. And so we just copy and paste, and we do that for each of these files. And so look at how quick that we do this. We're just going to go back and forth. And I'm doing this on one monitor, by the way. But if you've got a secondary monitor, even easier. And voila. All 3 were pasted in seconds. Nothing to worry about on that front. And you'll see the only things that we really care about are the numbers in the bottom right. So it actually flips on its head. The player who picked their element and their corner first is actually going to take their turn last. But there is a caveat to that, because everyone is going to start at a different resource total depending on where they're actually going in the turn. The player who goes first, aka the player who picked their corner last, is going to start out at 10 food, 10 building materials. The player who goes second is going to start at 13-13. The player who goes third is going to go 16-16. And then the player who is going last, aka the player who picked first, is going to start out at 20-20. And that feels like a really, really big advantage. And economically, it's going to look like a huge advantage the first couple of turns. But you will see it very heavily even itself out by turn 3 or so. And so, since we are going to be playing Fire, who let's just say that they picked their corner last, we're going to start at 10-10. We've already set up our resource sheets here, and so we are pretty much set to go. But what is actually happening on our turn? What pieces are in our bag? And like we said, this game is going to be weighing on our food and building materials, and so we can find all the general rules to pretty much everything happening in this notebook page up here. This is going to give you a lot of crucial information as you're learning the game. On top of these files over here in the corner of the board that also have all this information for everyone to read if you want that more realistic hands-on paper type feel, you know, to really match that board game experience. We even have a compass rose in the bottom corner here because directions do play an impact in this game. So everything matters. Now let's take a look at our cards here. And something that is in everyone's bag when they access it while they're learning the game are your phases and actions of turns. Because really, in this game, there's only 6 things you're doing on your turn at a time. You're just doing them in a number of combinations, and you're weighing several decisions. But you're doing 6 fairly basic actions on every turn. That's really it. And so these pieces that we have in our bag, we've got dice that are involved in several aspects of the game, but it's always mentioning when that's happening. And we've got these pieces here that we are working on getting our own custom appearances for all of our elements here. But we start out with a fairly unique character. This is your general. Your general is your main character on the board, and you always start out with your general. And even if he is to lose a battle, he never actually perishes. He is resurrected at your capital tile. And so everyone starts out with their general on their capital tile. And then you'll see we've got these little gnomes or dwarves. I'm not sure how they're labeled in this game. These are going to serve as your soldiers. And typically you are producing those via food. But where are you going to produce them at? You're going to produce them with your barracks. You can put down 3 different types of structures on your tiles that you own. Because in this game, you are going to be moving your units around the board, occupying new lands, and those lands are going to give you a multitude of different benefits to your economy, but also can have very, very powerful effects that have an immediate or long-lasting effect on the game. And so, we're going to look at these basic actions here. Every unit that I end up owning on a turn is allowed to move, typically 1 hex per turn. Now, there are effects that hinder that, there are effects that bolster that, and so you have to look out for those. We can purchase any tile that we have a unit on, and that we can find those prices to those pages in the corner of the table or in our notebook up top as we're learning those numbers. And any tile that we own, we can construct buildings on. If I put barracks on a tile, that will allow me to train soldiers at a more forward position. If I put a resource building on a tile, that will double the economic output of that tile. However, in most cases, I can only have one or the other on a tile. I cannot have both. And so yet again, another decision must be made. Is this going to be a tile that I need for my economy, or do I need it for a forward encampment to maintain a position on the board? However, every tile can also have typically 2 defensive fortifications placed on that tile. And this is going to make it harder for your opponent to take from it. And so here in a moment, what we're going to do is we're going to play through a simulated turn so that you can see all of the basic actions. The last piece that you'll find here, it's labeled army. And an army in this game means 5 soldiers put on the same tile with one another. Just like in the real world, when we work together, we become stronger. And so when these 5 units are placed on the same tile, they are removed and an army is put in their place. So an army is worth 5 soldiers. And this will give you a huge advantage in battle. However, there's a lot of effects that revolve around the fact that these are armies as well. Once again, more to consider, more things to weigh in how you're going to actually pursue this game. So now we've assessed what the win conditions are, we've assessed the basic pieces of this game. Let's go in the more unique aspects of this board. We have the 4 corners where everyone is starting, we have the basic environmental tiles, but what the heck is going on with these monsters? These monsters are called boss tiles. Not only do they allow you to earn a win condition in the game, but the moment that you defeat them, you gain long-lasting effects. You can find all of their information in the notebook tab, or you can find them on the board as well. And there are many elements that would actually like to prioritize going for these as opposed to gunning for their opponent. And so lots of things to consider on that front. But in the middle of the board, these are known as landmark tiles. And the center tile is always the elemental temple, because it is the central theme of this game. Because at turn 10, this elemental temple is going to disappear. It's going to vanish and become the Aether tile, in which anyone can fight for the right to earn the Aether element. You actually abandon your original element that you came into this game with, and you become Aether, which is the only way for one element to use other elements' abilities. Kind of think Avatar-esque in a way. But it is a truly ascended and very, very powerful opportunity to pursue. But the other tiles in contention can have very, very powerful effects. Sometimes you can't own them. Sometimes they are simply there for multiple different nations to get on there and maybe purchase other services, that sort of thing. Other times, they have very, very powerful effects, such as the portal that allows you to immediately teleport from your capital tile to the center of the board and then move again. But once again, you can find that information in the notebook tab or on the pages over here in the corner of the board. So there's lots of things to consider, and your early game is very, very important to plan ahead. That being said, when you're first getting into the game, you're probably taking it turn by turn, which is what we're about to learn about now. But it would very much behoove you to think about, from your opponent's perspective, what are they potentially going to try to do? How can I counter it? Because remember, only one player can win. The moment that someone gets to 2 win conditions, they immediately win, no playing around it. So now let's go into a basic turn and let's show you some of the things that we are doing here. So now from the point of view of the Fire Nation, we are going to take our first turn to show you what is actually happening here. And remember, you have access to this phases/actions of turns cards so that you can know in general what you should be doing. What you do at the start of your turn, no matter what, is you're going to draw from this larger deck called the Advantage deck. And I'm going to go ahead and draw actually the top 3 cards on this deck because I know what they are. And I'm going to show you a few of the things that could occur. Now, when you're actually in this game, you're actually going to be in a corner. And when you drag cards to your hand, only you can see them. But I am going to leave them face up on the table to show you what these cards actually do. Remember, they are called advantage cards, so of course they are intended to give you an advantage, which could be in the form of boosting yourself or hindering your opponent. And one of 3 things could occur. You could first draw an announce card. An announce card will immediately have its effects read, so you have to read this out to the table and carry it out if it's possible. And so let's say on turn 1 we drew this. Your homeland sends 3 soldiers and 5 food to your capital. And so right away, we get a bolster to our food, and we get 3 soldiers sent to our home. And you can copy them on the board. A lot of people will just, generate a good pool of resources and buildings for themselves in the beginning of the game. Just copy a bunch of them so that you don't have to worry about that later in the game. And so you can just proceed with your turn after that. So we drew an announce card and got a huge effect on turn 1. Secondary, you could draw an advantage card, and you can hold up to 4 of these cards in your hand. And so you can wait for the opportune moment to actually play them. Now, the vast majority of them can only be played on your turn. It is very rare for you to be actually using an advantage card that is not on your turn. And that goes for both your elemental abilities and your advantage cards. But you'll notice there's a little difference here. This advantage card over here has a little C, and this means it can be used in combat, and the text of it is going to be very much flavored for that. You can see it actually mentions battle in its name, meaning I am going to be giving myself an advantage in this battle, and we will show you what that looks like here momentarily. This one over here says place a second resource building on an own tile. Remember, we can typically only have either 1 barracks or 1 resource building on a tile, and this allows me to have a second, so I'm getting even more resources from that tile there. And so, all of these are really, really cool to obtain, and some of them even give you some direction on what win condition you should possibly be pursuing for this game. So now, we've drawn our advantage card. We'll just make a little trash pile over here so that all of our other players at the table can take a look at it to make sure they're playing honestly, and then everyone else can toss their cards there as well. So once again, we draw from the advantage deck, and now we're going to perform a combination of our basic actions. We can move any unit that we have the turn that they are spawned. We can purchase any tiles that we have units on them. And so I am going to go for the middle of this board, and I'm just going to kind of spread out here. And so now, what are we going to do? Well, we want to own land, because owning these tiles not only gives us positions on the board, but it enhances our economy. And those contributions to economy can be found up here at the top of the notebook and or the pages in the top left of the table over here. And so if I am doing my math correctly, something else that a lot of players end up having to do on turn 1 is you can't put a resource building on your capital, even though it is generating you resources each turn, but we can put a barracks there and we can train soldiers from there. And so the other generic basic rules that you're looking out for are in this notebook here or in the rules that you're following in the Discord as well. In the tier 1 stage, which is what everyone is starting at, you can only produce 3 soldiers per barracks. Once you hit tier 2, from that point on, every barracks can produce a maximum of an army per turn. And so you have to play around that. On top of that, we want to be able to progress our economy so that we can advance to tier 2 and tier 3. Remember that we only have access to our tier 1 abilities that we've selected at this point. And yes, I can use any number of them on a turn, but I want to get to these more powerful ones later on in the game. And so we want to get our economy there. And to go to tier 2, it costs 10 food and 10 BM. You actually spend this amount. And we are not allowed to do so until it actually hits turn 3. And you'll see that a lot of nations actually turtle up and try to go for that as early as possible. And so that is something that we could see here. So now what we're going to do as the Fire Nation and us going first, we're at 15 and 10 courtesy of that announced card. We are going to purchase a couple of tiles. And so we can purchase the field and the mountain. And something that I didn't mention before is in that baggie of pieces that you earned, you can just drag your hand out of there. And these coins symbolize that we own these tiles. And we'll show you how this is going to affect our economy here in just a moment, as it is very, very easy to track. And so a mountain costs 5 food and 2 building materials. So I'm going to subtract that proper amount there. So I'm at 10 and 8 after that. And a mountain costs 2 food and 5 building materials. So I'm going to subtract 2. And then I'm going to subtract 3. Now I've got options. I could either purchase this lake, or I could put a building on one of these tiles that I own. Usually it's good to own as much land as we possibly can. And if you'll recall, and if you're doing the math at home, we would not have been able to do this if we didn't draw the announce card that we did. So these cards are playing a huge impact right from the get-go. So we've moved all of our units. We have purchased tiles. We weren't able to actually construct any buildings on them, but perhaps we can in the following turn. But now what we can do is we can activate any abilities if we would like to. And it's not always the best to do so on turn 1, but Fire gets an advantage from converting own mountain tiles into volcanoes. That's one of their tier 1 abilities. Let's go ahead and do that. Why am I doing this? Because Fire gets advantages from owning mountains and volcanoes. And volcanoes give them a huge bolster to their attacking power. And so I'm converting this mountain tile to a volcano. And how am I going to do that? Well, in the bottom corner of this board, you'll find copies of all of the generic tiles, like so. Feel free to place that on, give it a few clicks of increasing its size, lock it in place, and boom, now I own a volcano instead of a mountain. So let's say that's the end of my turn because it is the first couple of turns here. Then we are going to go down and actually recalculate our economic output for this turn. And we'll show you how easy it is. And just for experience sake, let's go ahead and say that we actually were able to put a building on this lake as well. So just to help us show you what that looks like down here in just a moment. So I have purchased a field. I now own a volcano, and I own a lake that has a resource building on it. And remember, what resource buildings do is they will actually double the economic output of any tile that you put it on. And so the notebook is telling you how much they're making generally, and if you put a building on it, it is going to double that amount. So let's go down here to our page. Fields and lakes are going to alter our food production, and your capital tile automatically produces you 3 food and 3 BM each turn, which is why we see this 3 in the bottom right here and this 3 in the bottom right here, because we already had a capital at the beginning of this turn. But I purchased a field and a lake that's going to contribute to my food, and I earned myself a volcano that is going to contribute to my building materials. And so all that I have to worry about is this first 0 here, this first equal sign. This second equal sign is what this little program, this little mod does for me. I never touch that. And notice that when you click on the card, it highlights the entire thing, so you have to then click again to make sure you go where you want it, and everything is clearly labeled for us at the top. Fields and resource buildings are A, lakes and resource buildings are B, so on and so forth. So I purchased 1 field, so I backspace that 0 and I put a 1, and notice that my net food has increased. It's now at 5. And then I also purchased a lake, but I didn't just buy the lake. I put a building on it as well. So instead of putting a 1 here, I'm actually going to put a 2. So I am netting 9 food this turn based on the tiles that I earn. And on top of that, I purchased a volcano. Or rather, I converted a mountain to a volcano. So my economy is at a 9 and 5. So at the end of the turn, once everyone has taken their turn, I am going to add 9 food, and I'm going to add 5 BM to my total, and this is where I'm starting at next turn. And so you can see we can bolster our economy to the point where we can make huge, massive plays that our opponent simply wasn't expecting. And then, once everyone has taken their turn and everyone has received payment, we actually draw from the map condition deck. Yes, this game has weather built in, yet another variable that adds to the complexity and uniqueness of this game that can either have immediate effects on the board or dictates the experience or conditions of the next couple of turns. For example, we have just drawn Solar Flare. Fire Nation units have +2 on their dice roll for the next 2 turns. No new map condition card is drawn until this event is complete. So for the next 2 turns, I have an advantage as the Fire Nation, and my opponents better watch out. So let's go see if we can get involved on the combat side of things. Because a step that we didn't take this turn, obviously because we weren't in reach of our opponents, is we can go into combat. So let's simulate what that looks like, and that will be the final thing that you need in order to get into the action and join this table and go for your chance at obtaining the new element Aether. So now we are at turn 2, let's just say, which this is not a realistic turn 2, but we're at turn 2. And we see that our Water Nation neighbors have obtained this rainforest, and we would like it. Because the winner of this combat, if we are attacking, actually obtains this land for free, and it immediately contributes to their economy. And remember, lots of tiles can be in a lot of contention, because maybe they're contributing to win conditions. Maybe my opponent needs it to win, maybe I need it to win. But let's show you how this is going to work. Most of our abilities have a one-time use, which is why we flipped this over. There are multiple ways to regain access to those. But let's see what we're doing here, and let's see what options the Fire Nation has at taking down their water neighbors. But there's lots of variables to consider here as well, because this Water Nation, not only does he own this tile, he has a soldier and a defensive fortification. And all of these, and the fact that he's water, are variables that I should be considering when I'm considering an attack on my opponent. Because there's actually a little rock, paper, scissors effect built into the game, and different elements have different interactions with others. For example, water puts out fire, so water inherently gets a little advantage anytime they are fighting fire. So it might feel like that's a lost cause right now, but certainly not when we have things like the weather on our side. So lots of things can make losing battles very favorable for you. On top of that, we own a volcano, and volcanoes contribute +2 to our dice roll when we are attacking. And so with all that being said, I have to take my turn, which includes going through the basic actions once again. And maybe I draw this card this turn. I draw the Sharpened Steel card, adding +3 to my general's dice roll for a battle. So I'm going to put that into my hand, and I'm going to hold on to that for later, and let's see what we can do here. Because on this field tile, I could produce a barracks, which costs 3 building materials. And then in Tier 1, most nations can only train 3 soldiers per turn. Fire does have an advantage, though, where they can train an army. Remember that an army is worth 5 soldiers from a barracks for 12 food. And so we might want to do that, or maybe we don't want to use all of our food on one play. Maybe we only train a couple of soldiers or so that's going to be 3 food apiece, and we're going to put those on the field here. Right? And we want to attack them, but oh my goodness, they're 2 tiles away. Remember that most of the time, units can only move once per turn. However, Fire is built different, so to speak, because they have an ability known as Battle Cry, and it's a Tier 1 ability. Your units can move 2 tiles this turn, but they must attack. And so we are declaring battle on the Water Nation. We are moving from the field to this mountain, and then from the mountain to this rainforest. And is this a fully thought out turn? Absolutely not. We just want to show you how the battle works. And so we are going into the fray. We've declared battle. Our opponent knows we are coming, and this counts as us moving into their tile. So your units cannot have moved prior to battling because you are moving into their land. That is how it works. And in general, how this is going to work is all of these factors are going to contribute to a total, and whoever has the bigger number wins. The loser will lose all of their units involved in the battle, and the winner will own the tile at the end of the day. And if that happens to be me, the Fire Nation, then I get a rainforest for free, and I am allowed to fortify it if I have the resources to do so. That is the only thing that I should be doing. So like a lot of games, this is a battle phase. There should be no other steps that are done once I reach the battle phase. I am only fighting. I can't play other abilities or anything like that. I am attacking. And that is the last thing that I'm going to be doing on my turn. On top of that, you have as many attacks as the tier that you are. So if you're tier 1, you can attack once. Tier 2, you can attack twice, etc., etc. Tier 3, you can attack 3 times. However, units can typically only be involved in 1 battle per turn. So all of these guys, if I were a higher tier, they are going to be done. They're going to be exhausted after this battle here. So what do we do now? Well, the attacker gets to elect to choose if they're going to play advantage cards. Let's just say for this battle, I'm going to utilize the advantage card that I just drew, Sharpened Steel. This is going to add +3 to my general's dice roll for this battle. And then maybe my opponent can play advantage cards. The defender will then choose if they're going to play advantage cards. And if not, which our water player is not going to do so, now we go into the RNG aspect of this game, which is a lot of fun because low rolls often can dictate the loser of the battle. And so, in battle, if your general is there, he gets his own dice roll, and then all of your soldiers get 1 dice as well. So whether you have 1 soldier or 100 soldiers, 1 dice roll dictates all of their attack value the entire way through. And so what I've done is I've brought the fire combat card up here and the water combat card up here to show you how easy this is to use. And so the attacker is going to roll first. This first roll is going to be for my general. I rolled a 2, and so now we are going to incorporate our +3 to our general's dice roll for this battle. So that is a total of 5. And so I'm going to come over here to fire. My notice up here it says 1 is yes, 0 is no, and we've got a whole bunch of no's already listed for us. So first, our general is there, which we're going to change that to yes. So we've got a general, and on top of that, he just rolled a total of 5. So for the F section, we're going to put a 5 there. All right. And then we also didn't account for the fact that our weather is present here. Fire Nation units have +2 on their dice roll, so we are going to consider that as well. So our general is technically rolling a 7. And now we roll for our soldiers, and we have 3 soldiers here. So we're going to roll. We rolled a 1, but fear not, because we have Solar Flare on our side, so this is actually a 3. So we're going to go ahead and fill out the fact that we've got 3 soldiers here. Right? Type that in. Soldier's dice roll is D, and we're going to go ahead and say a 3 there. And notice I didn't account for the fact that I have a volcano. But at the top of our page here, we see that volcano tiles owned is I. I don't have to actually manually add that to my dice roll, because if I'm keeping track of the game, this is going to do that for me, and I'm going to get a little bolster onto my attack value once I punch that in. And so notice, without the volcano, I'm at a 21. With the volcano, I'm at a 27. So a very, very healthy value. J is my result when attacking. K is my result when defending. And so I'm attacking with a 27 here as the Fire Nation. And that's feeling like a really, really good victory. And plus, it's a 4v1. What can this guy do? Well, when you're defending, naturally, you have a little bit of home field advantage. So even if we had nothing on this tile, there is some sort of defensive value here. It has a total defense of 5. When I have a defensive fortification, each one of them adds 10. But then on top of that, we've got a soldier that is going to roll, and then we are fighting against fire here. So let's see what the Water Nation's roll is. He rolls a 2. And so let's fill in all of our data here. We've got a whopping 1 soldier. And we just rolled a lovely 2. We've got number of defensive fortifications is G. There's 1 of those. And then lastly, we are fighting against fire. And because we are fighting against fire, we get a little advantage on top of that. We're defending with a 22, and that is just 1 soldier. But fire is going to win this day because they are at a 27. So water is going to lose, but it wasn't that far off of a fight. And that has to do with what elements were actually involved there, which is a pretty cool thing to consider. And so all of those guys are getting taken out. We now own this rainforest, and we could make changes to our resource calculations down here at the bottom, but we now own it. The only thing that we should be doing after that is, if we have the resources, and we do, because it costs 3 defensive fortifications, or sorry, it costs 3 building materials to put a defensive fortification down, the last thing I can do is I can fortify a tile that I just claimed. I cannot do anything else on my turn. I didn't move my units over here. I can't go, oh, I forgot to do that. I forgot to do that. You cannot do that. Once you attack, that is the last thing you do on your turn, and it goes to the next player. So, all that considered, that is what you can do on your turn. Fairly basic moves, And yet, because of the complexity of the weather and all the different advantage cards you can pull on top of the other abilities that your opponents could be playing, you've got a lot of things to consider. And you want to plan ahead because the name of the game is to get 2 win conditions. And whoever does it first is the only one who can trash talk at the end of the day. So I hope this is looking the least bit interesting to you. Those that have been involved already are becoming quite passionate about it, getting quite involved, getting excited about it because this game is evolving every week. We're adding changes, we're making changes, we're trying to make a balanced, cohesive board game with a competitive side. So I do hope that you'll invite your fellow nerdy friends and get involved and make some new friends with the community that we already have because we are hosting games each and every week and you are more than welcome to play with your friends at home. So, we're making a dream happen. We're making a dream reality. That's that. Empires of Aether. I hope you're excited. I'm real glad to have you here. We'll see you soon.